Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into game show night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, won't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Elayne Reiss. I am in Washington, D.C., and I am a data scientist. In the mid-90s, I was on a one-season children's game show called Secrets of the Cryptkeeper's Haunted House.
Elayne, I usually start these conversations by finding out what role game shows played in the contestant's life before they got the chance to be part of that world in person. Are you a game show fan? I can tell by your email address, and I won't say it out
Yes.
loud, that you are somewhat of a game show fan.
Yes. So I would say, oh, actually, funny story. So I mean, I am a child of the 80s, brought up still in the 90s, of course. And I have stories from my parents where, the Scrabble game show with Chuck Woolery in the late
Oh, one of
80s?
my favorites. Before I even knew how to play it, I loved it. I just love watching it.
I was told by my parents that I would solve the puzzles before the contestants did sometimes, and I was like 3.
But
So,
that's a great show for a kid to play along with because
oh
it's not like
yeah.
Wheel of Fortune where there's like a whole phrase to fill in. They just show you, the 7 or 8 letter word. So it's just filling in one word at a time.
Yeah, I think I mean that in conjunction with probably other things made them realize that I probably had a pretty good vocabulary at a young age. They knew. They're smart. Uh
Now, was that because of game shows or was it because of things other than that?
Probably things other than that. My brother's 2 years older than me, and I wanted to do everything that he did, including go to school. So therefore I was just a voracious learner. I wanted to read all of the books. That was me as a kid. But watching game shows, I mean, yeah, of course I remember watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune at a young age. I would say early 90s is when you started watching Press Your Luck on USA, or Family Channel of whatever they would have on, uh, watching Price is Right, of course. That loved doing that whenever it was break from school, or rarely homesick really, but break from school, it's like, oh yeah, we get to watch Price is Right. We're actually home at 11 a.m. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was what my life was made of. Before I started going to school when I was really young, my dad was a high school art teacher. So he was out from, 8 to 4 every day. My mom stayed at home and took care of me and my brother. And that's all she watched during the day. And I don't know, to this day, I'm not even sure if it was by choice or by necessity, because it's hard to imagine, I think, for people who watch daytime TV these days. But back in the day, game shows made up 90% of what was on daytime TV, and the Family Channel and USA, those game
Yep.
show blocks made up my TV diet growing up. It made me who I was for better or worse. And Press Your Luck and Sale of the Century and Scrabble
Yes.
and Name That, all that stuff. And again, even before I understood the game, I just like watching the show. And Scrabble, like you mentioned, fits really well into that category.
Yeah, it was just amazing to have all of that TV on, because otherwise you'd flip to other channels and it would be soap operas, which nobody in my family was a soap opera person. So it's not like, some kids you meet, or you meet adults who as children they said, "Oh yeah, my grandma used to watch insert soap opera name here." That wasn't my family, so it was more okay, well, what else is there on TV? There's game shows. Yeah, then you had Nickelodeon, which that maybe came a little later in my childhood, and that saved those hours when there was not a game show on. But really, if you're 6, 7 years old and it's the middle of the summer and it's too hot, or the weather's just not great to be outside doing something, or you're not at day camp, what else is there on TV to
Oh, for
watch? I mean,
sure.
I read, but sometimes you just wanted to sit down and watch TV.
Well,
And
especially something like Nickelodeon,
yeah,
where it's so colorful. And I think the game show era of Nickelodeon definitely came a few years later, like late 80s, early 90s, when they had, the. I remember watching Family Double Dare at 7 a.m. on
yes,
Sundays. That is like or Saturdays rather. That's
yes,
what started the broadcast day on Nickelodeon. You think about it now, and it's like, it's like having candy for breakfast. It's like such a rich and exciting thing to have so early in the morning. But it was
right. Now
it was
there's like
perfect for some reason.
now there's like 30 seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants that they probably start the day with. I don't even know. I'm just guessing, because I swear that show is just going to be on forever.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but yeah, between Family Double Dare, I really wanted to be on Double Dare. I mean, later came Guts and Legends of the Hidden Temple, which I really, really wanted to be on those shows, but I was probably just a smidgen too young at that point, and not yet living in Florida, where of course all the kids on those shows came from.
Right.
So yeah, that was something I wanted to do. As a child, I'd say late elementary school, I I decided I really wanted to be on Teen Jeopardy. That didn't happen. Even though I think I would have done well at it because, as I always say, 16th century French literature is never going to be my category, but Teen Jeopardy seemed to have just slightly more relatable categories that I could get behind.
Oh
So when
yeah,
I
for
was
sure.
9, 10, I said, one day I'm going to be old enough to be on that show, and things happen, and then you don't follow through on those dreams, and it's okay.
It is
It's
okay. I've
it's okay.
That's been one of the lessons I've learned this year, that if the dream doesn't materialize in just the way that you thought it was going to, it is okay.
Yes.
That's because you could drive. I think you could, and I won't harp on this too much, but I think you could drive yourself crazy, wanting uh wanting a goal for yourself to manifest in such a way, and if it doesn't come out in just that way, it's a failure. That's a very kind of black and white way of thinking about it, and part of, and I'm sure you can relate to this to a certain degree. I think maybe more than just me and you can, but um, just coming to peace with however that thing manifests itself. It may not be the way you want it to be, but it's what you need at that at that particular moment. Hopefully,
Very true. Very, very true.
yeah. Legends of the Hidden Temple, I feel like, is Double Dare for kids who liked to read. It was a physical game show with that added twist of literature. You learned a really cool story on every episode, and it's just such a unique bend on that Double Dare-ish format.
The thing that I enjoyed watching it, I think I always wanted to be on Guts more than Legends of the Hidden Temple because I like the educational component of Legends, but I'd always watch those shows and say it is really, really difficult to win that game. I mean, so many times you'd end up with one or one and a half pendant. You can't do anything with that half pendant unless you find the other half somewhere in the temple. So rarely did children go through and have two pendants. It's hard to avoid the temple guard that many times without the pendant.
Right. And
So
I feel like the
yeah,
games on each episode were structured in such a way that it was really hard to get more than one and a half or two. Getting two pendants was really difficult. But I feel
yes,
like they stacked the games almost like the way the Price is Right does, like when the budget's low, they'll put the really hard games in.
yes,
You know what I
yes.
mean? Like they just, they kind of game it in that way.
Absolutely. But it was fun to watch. Guts, I look at it and say, I want to be tied to a bungee playing basketball. I want to take rollerblades down a track and, go through obstacles and things like
Right.
that.
You climb the aggro crag. That was the
Right.
coolest thing in the world.
And the joke was the time I was just probably the least coordinated child. I mean, I could skate. I mean, I wasn't that uncoordinated, but compared to the children that they probably got for that show who were, you know, young student athletes, I'm sure I would have had no business being on that show. But they presented it in a way to make it feel like a child could dream and do anything with bungee sports.
Right. 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 I'm thinking about the shows that you're mentioning. So I'm thinking about Guts and Legends of the Hidden Temple, and we even talked about Scrabble and Press Your Luck. And one of the commonalities I noticed in those shows, and I think that it was true for me to a certain degree, because I think you and I sort of grew up watching the same shows.
Yes.
Um, they are all shows that if you don't understand what's happening, they're still fun to look at. I mean, Press
Yes.
Your Luck is a game show with a cartoon baked into it. Guts, like you said, is basketball on bungee cords, and there's a giant neon glowing mountain. Even something like, I remember Sale of the Century, which is, it was like a quiz show, but there were so many like lights. Like I remember the host podium just had like this rainbow swirl of lights in front of it that was on all the time. It would light up with a green check mark when somebody was right and a red X if someone was wrong. I was fascinated by that. And that to me at that age made it a great game show.
Yeah, I've rewatched those on Buzzer more recently. I said, "Oh yeah, I do remember watching some of these as a kid." It didn't necessarily stand out in my mind the same way of, "Wow, this is really taking me back." But I said, "Oh yeah, I did watch these." But you're right. The way the set, I mean, my brother and I will joke of when you hit one of those spots, it's like seizure lights, that would go off. Um, when you hit on the board one of the numeric spots. I'm blanking out because it's been a little bit
Oh,
since
on
I've
Sailor Essential,
watched
the
it.
money cards.
Yes,
Yeah. And they
yes,
do that
yes,
thing where they cut really back and forth, like between the money and the contestant. Yeah, they
yes,
do that.
exactly. It's
Yep,
like,
yep,
wow,
yep.
that's very seizure inducing.
Oh my God. Well, even look at something like Press Your Luck. I mean, there are like thousands of light bulbs on that set, and they are on all the time,
Yes.
you
Yeah, I like
know?
watching the new version on ABC now. I think it's probably one of the best revivals that they've done in recent years. Well, as evidenced by the fact that they're still making new ones and they haven't canned it. So it
Oh,
has to
yeah,
be
for
working for
sure.
somebody.
For sure. I mean, there was a period, I think, in the early 2000s when a lot of production companies, I think, tried to reboot game shows. I mean, there was a new like Pyramid with Donny Osmond, and they had the
Yes.
all new Press Your Luck on Game Show Network. And I feel like they were all just too different for the sake of being different. And I've mentioned this in a few other episodes, but I feel like right now we're at this point where, uh, game show producers are learning how to reboot shows in a way that is new enough to look fresh, but retro enough to for audiences to know that this is a tribute to an older show. We're
Yes.
just kind of towing that line, which I think is good.
Yeah, absolutely. The My favorite classic game probably is Match Game, and I say you can't recapture that complete drunken spirit of the Gene Rayburn version.
No,
And that's why the reboots have been okay, some better than others. But I would say it's just it needs more shades of burnt sienna. It's just, but
it
you
does more
can't.
shag carpet and stucco. I think is what it needs.
Yes, like the most recent version, I think, did one of the best jobs of capturing most of that spirit, but it was a little slick. But you're not going to just bring back the 70s. It's not going to be the same. Press Your Luck, I think, even down to their new versions of the animated whammies. Um, there's some throwbacks to the old ones. There's some new ones that are funny. I like just even the whammies that are on the board. I love Whammy CEO. Is probably my favorite whammy square that they've put up.
Yeah, they're
You know,
I love the new cartoons where they're animated in the old style, but I
yes,
love it. I love it.
yeah, that's enough where they've put just a little bit of modern polish on, but it still has enough of the old vibe. They haven't mucked around with the gameplay too much. It's just fun to watch. They obviously do a really good job of casting the right contestants for that show. Like you need high energy for that show, or it's not going to work. Whereas I think the '80s versions, I mean, it was there were so many episodes of it. I mean, think about how much casting they did. They had more ordinary Joes on who maybe didn't have to have a very certain personality to work because it wasn't, I mean, it was on like every day. So a little different from casting. But yeah, that works. Match Game, you're not going to resurrect it, but it's format wise, you can't beat it.
Sure. There are a few shows like that. Match Game is in that category. I would put the Gong Show in that category. I
Yes.
would put the Dating Game, the Newlywed Game in that category. There are shows that owe a lot of their charm and their entertainment value to the spirit of that time. Match Game in the 70s was Match Game in the way that it was because you couldn't swear on Match Game. You couldn't say
Right.
the actual answer. There was that sense of kind of, tiptoeing around the line and being sort of risque and double entendres that I think has passed Match Game by. You can't play that game the same anymore. And right, like you said, they try to revive it, and I agree with you. I think the ABC version was the most, I'll call it the most authentic to the original 70s version. Maybe or maybe not because there was an on-set bartender, but that's a whole
Right.
completely different story. But there are so many shows like that where, they try to revive, like they tried to do the Gong Show many, many, many times. And it's just not the same. I wasn't around in the 70s. I don't know what caused that particular cultural climate that gave birth to that show, but they've tried so hard to recapture it, and you just can't. It's not the 70s anymore.
You're never gonna you can't recreate Gene Gene the Dancing Machine. I mean,
No,
that's part of
never.
it too.
No one could ever. No one can. Who would ever be Gigi the Dancing Machine?
Yes, just doing his shuffle. having
Yeah,
things thrown at him. They can't do that now. It's very wrong.
right. And I just feel
Even
like
if the intent wasn't, it's kind of wrong.
yeah, and the thing is, like, TV, I feel like, not to be too much on a soapbox, but TV these days, I think, is so overproduced compared
It's
to
very
what it was
slick.
back then. It is. It's slick and it's edited and it's not spontaneous, or at least it. And maybe shows back then weren't as spontaneous as we think they might have been, but I have a suspicion that they were. You know what I mean?
Oh,
There's,
yes.
there's so many moments that can only come about. You can't write a bunch of the stuff that happens on those shows.
No, nope.
You know. Let's talk about how you got the opportunity to appear on Secrets of the Crypt Keeper's Haunted House, which I have never, ever, ever seen before.
Oh, wow. I think there is an episode, not my episode, there is an episode somewhere out on YouTube. I swear, because I was looking it up a couple of years ago and I said, oh, I wonder if anybody's posted one episode. So it does exist somewhere out on the interwebs. So mid 90s, my family moved from New York to Central Florida, of course, home of Disney, Universal Studios, and so forth.
Right.
And I was the kind of child who read the newspaper on the regular. I mean, it was the 90s. I did read news online, but we're still getting a regular printed newspaper on the daily. And every Friday was the calendar section that gave things to do and whatnot in the Orlando area. And I saw an ad for a contestant search for a children's game show looking for kids between the ages of 10 and 14, which I was between the ages of 10 and 14 at that time. Now, also living in that area, it wasn't an uncommon thing to just go as a family to the theme park, maybe have annual passes. We did happen to have annual passes to Universal Studios that year, so it wasn't uncommon for us to just go there and go to the park. That's where the tryouts were occurring. So it didn't really take a lot of convincing to my parents to say, hey, like, I mean, they knew how much I love game shows. It was no secret to them. They embraced it. I mean, they enjoyed watching these game shows with me. So it was all good. And I said, I could try to be on a game show. How cool would that be? They said, yeah, that's fine. We got no problem with that. So went down to whenever the call was, and it was a written exam and a physical challenge kind of exam. Now, I will say that again, going back to what I previously noted, I was not by any means an athletic child. I could do well with like running short distances and things. I was reasonably fit, but I couldn't do a pull up. I don't think I still can. So
Same.
nothing's really changed. Uh, so I was not. I always think back to elementary school of watching the child from Eastern European country climb up and down the rope 5 times, and I could make it about halfway through, not even if I was lucky. Um, I was not the coordinated child. Whatever the physical challenge was I think running short distances and just not being put to some longevity test, which is why it was fine. The written exam, not that you got a grade on it, I probably got 100%. I probably was thinking, okay, is this all you can give me? I want more of a challenge, but I
And,
was humble.
and so what was on the written exam? Was it like straight trivia? What were they
It was
testing you on?
trivia. It was
Okay.
trivia. It was like, who's the first president of the United States kind of thing. Like, and I'm not exaggerating too much of the level of difficulty that I remember. I was going into the eighth grade at that point. I skipped a grade, so I was young going into the eighth grade, but I had been through a fair bit of school at that point, and the trivia was obviously written that an ordinary 10-year-old could probably handle it, which is why I looked at this and said, okay, you could do better, but okay, this is fine. Um, we received some information. They, the producers or whoever probably spoke to me. And then a little while later, my parents probably got a call back. Because, of course, this is the 90s. We didn't have, you had one phone number for your home, and it was your parents who answered.
Sure, of
I
course.
think about today, if this happened, like you'd be 13 and children have their own phone number that they'd be reached out to. So it'd be very different.
This world
So
is a
yeah,
nightmare.
I know. I know. So I don't remember like when my parents got the call back that, oh, uh we're asking to have your daughter participate in this show, but I got on. I remember, learning about whatever arrangements needed to happen for calendars and things like that. But whatever it was, we were able to make it work. It was summer break before school started, so it wasn't too difficult. And that was it. Went down for a uh let's learn the ropes, and they showed us all the different games that you could potentially play and practice a couple of things, and then we went back on another day for the actual taping. So that was the process overview of how this all went down.
In terms of age, how old were you compared to the other kids that were in the audition? Were you on the younger side or were you on the older side?
I was on the slightly younger side. Uh I was 11, I was almost 12 at that point. So between 10 and 14, um they had a mix. I don't remember that, oh, there was a bunch of 10-year-olds or a bunch of 14-year-olds. I was pretty squarely, I'd say we're squarely in the middle then in that case, but maybe a smidgen younger. It was interesting though because there were kids that were my age, but I was like 2 grades ahead of them. So we'd be talking about like, oh yeah, school started. It's like, yeah, I'm going to sixth grade. I'm like, yeah, I'm almost finishing middle school. Okay.
Oh,
But
did
you're
you
cool. It's all good.
had you skipped a couple grades?
One, and my birthday's later in the year, so I
Oh,
started kindergarten
understood.
when I was 4. So that's why I was 11 starting the 8th grade at that point.
Got it.
Yeah.
You and I have that in common. I think I was 11 when I skipped kindergarten and first because I had a high reading level, and I yeah, I don't regret it, but I don't know that I would do that to my child. I think that I would just have them go through the process the way that they go through the process, and have them spend time with the kids their age, and you know be one of them.
I personally don't have regrets because I think about it and say I skipped, it was long story, half of 5th grade and half of 6th grade. Because we moved in the middle of a year to a school district that was like, yeah, great. We're
Right.
more than happy to skip your daughter. Uh, and I realized that my social life wouldn't have been substantially better or worse had I stayed in my same grade. I firmly believe. So if that was going to be the same, I may as well have been not bored in my classes. But yeah, so you ended up in situations like this where, I was socially sort of in a different place than some of the younger children or children of similar age that they paired us up with, but all was good. I was very used to it, and I got along with most people, so it wasn't a problem.
Well, I also imagine that in a situation like a game show audition, where it's not only the physical test or the written test, but there's a bit of an interview. They want to know about you and who you are and how telegenic and talkative you are. I imagine that you, like you said, being in a different social strata compared to those other kids probably worked to your advantage when it comes to that kind of thing.
It probably did, and they probably realized too as they're trying to pair up children because we were on teams. You just got paired up with another random child that they selected. At some of the episodes it was like same gender teams. My episode it was boy girl teams. So I was paired up with another boy who was, I think he was about my age anyway. Uh, but they probably realized that they knew who the more athletic children were and who the maybe the slightly more academic children were, and made sure that the teams had a reasonable balance of both, so that kids would have a chance of being successful as a team. I mean, I knew that I was being selected because I could get the questions right and do okay enough on the physical pieces.
Sure. And I guess your partner was more attuned to the physical prowess.
Generally
Yeah.
speaking, I mean, the story of how our episode went was kind of interesting though. But yes, he definitely had more physical capabilities than I did.
So the show itself, so Secrets of the Crypt Keeper's Haunted House, this was on CBS Saturday morning, and I'm thinking
Yes.
about the context. So we're in the mid to late 90s. So we are in the heyday of the kids' physical game show. We got Double Dare, we got Guts, we got, we're just coming off of the early 90s where we had Funhouse and Legends of the Hidden
Yes.
Temple. And so this feels and seems like a uh, horror movie themed kids game show. Am I
Yep.
am I am I in the ballpark?
Absolutely. I mean, it was based on they took the Tales from the Crypt franchise, and I mean they had the Crypt Keeper. We didn't actually interact with the Crypt Keeper. These are just the scenes that they spliced in production. But we you had the Crypt Keeper there, and all of the games were spooky themed, Fireball Alley and things of that nature. So yes, it was all just spooky, haunted themed cobwebs, all of that going on.
I wonder if you have any insight into, because I think that some people have a mind for remembering the procedural when it comes to the experience, and some people just kind of remember it as it aired. I feel like a show with so many moving parts probably has a lot of stop down and a lot of editing and a lot of kind of waiting around, almost like you're on a movie set. I hear actors talk about, working on a movie, and they say one of the most difficult parts is, just hanging out in the trailer and shooting the same scene over and over and over again. How smooth do you remember the process of taping this show being?
So the games were a little disjointed. Um, I mean, there was a lot of CGI and hence a lot of green screen situations going on. The final game happened at the end, meaning it's not that we had some just ridiculous out of order, oh yeah, we already know who's winning or anything. Everything was done appropriately, that we knew as we were going through these games where the points stood, who was behind, who wasn't behind. So that was all in order and made sense. It was pretty smooth. I mean, I remember being there for it was a whole day. I mean, we probably got there relatively early in the morning, whether it was, I don't know, 8 o'clock, something like that. And I remember leaving there, it was probably 8 p.m.,
And this is at
something like that.
Universal, right?
This was a Universal on
Yeah.
one of the sound stages. Unfortunately, it wasn't a Nickelodeon production, so I didn't get to, visit all the Ren and Stimpy paraphernalia and things like that. It
Oh,
was
or
just
get slimed or
we
any of
got
that.
slot.
That's
No,
stupid.
no, I wasn't the kind of child who's into messy things. So the sliming was fun to watch. I just never wanted to have a part in it.
Sure.
But I did love Ren and Stimpy. Still do.
Oh,
But
Ren and Stimpy. All right, I'm going to pause for 1 second because Ren and Stimpy is a genius cartoon, and
absolutely.
there's a woman that I work with. I'm a hotel manager, by day, and there's a woman I work with who she's young. I'd say she's like 19 or 20, but she has such a sharp sense of humor. And one day I showed her a clip of Ren and Stimpy, and I think it was the episode where Stimpy's cousin comes to visit.
Sven Hoek.
Sven comes to visit, and Ren comes home from work, and his records are covered in bubble gum, and all his
Yes.
stuff is ruined. His collection of diseases, all the
Yes.
jars are
Yes.
open, and there's just that scene of just pure unhinged anger that would not play on TV today, but it's hilarious in a
Oh,
way
it's
that it's like there's nothing like that on TV anymore.
it's like, what is it? Oh, it's my brain. It's always falling out.
That's right, yeah.
The best line. Oh,
I'm gonna hit you.
yes.
And you're gonna fall.
My parents watched it with me. I've considered myself fortunate. There are some families that where we don't let our children watch it.
Yeah.
My parents let me watch it, but they watched it with us because they also, my dad especially, found it to be really funny. So it's
100% same. We were very fortunate kids.
yes, yes. And as I always say, I turned out just fine. So,
Sure.
in my
Me
opinion,
too.
total nerd. I turned out okay.
That's right.
But yeah, so going back to Cryptkeeper, unfortunately, it was in just a boring Universal soundstage. So yeah, we're there all day. My parents were there. My brother was also there. My brother would have just made the age cutoff if he wanted to try out, but we're both relatively shy children. He was more reserved than me, and he was okay just being witness to his little sister doing this whole process.
Sure.
So yeah, they were kind of on and off, but I mean, a parent had to be present at all times, so everybody was there, which added to the fond memories of the experience.
Tell me about your teammate.
My teammate was just another local boy. He was humble. Like he was a nice kid. He wasn't cocky or anything like that. Um, we it was very he knew that he was the athletic one of the group, and he was cool with that. And when we had different games, we were given a choice of, oh, who do you want to have doing this role or that role? And he was totally okay taking the more athletic roles. Um, I do remember the one, again, this gets into what my teammate was like. There was a game where there was a bunch of numeric panels on a fake rock wall, and you're all mic'd up, and this is something where I couldn't get out of doing the physical piece of it. Like otherwise it would have been really, really obvious that I was doing nothing other than answering questions, and I kind of needed to participate. And I believe that the other boy girl team, the girls took the same games and the boys took the same games, so it was a reasonable comparison between the teams that way. Not that it should be gender rolled, but it was kind of clear that on both teams the boy was the more physical one. It's just how it worked out with these particular pairings. But yeah, I couldn't get out of doing this, and it was numeric panels on a rock wall. Your partner, so my teammate, would ask the question, and every answer was in the form of a number. So I remember there was a question of the president's plane is Air Force, whatever. Obviously, the answer is one. So you had to find the number one on the wall. You had three rope ladders and then a rope to get between it. Now, I remember the story I told you much earlier about watching the Eastern European child or child who had recently immigrated from Eastern Europe climb up and down the rope. Several years later, I still couldn't climb up and down a rope. A ladder I can handle, but my complete lack of upper body strength led to some moments like I knew the answer. I shout out the answer, and my partner would say, "Oh, are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure. I can't get over." I didn't say all of this because I'm just, trying to focus on my task at hand as the clock is ticking. But I'm just desperately trying to get over to this panel where I see it. I know where it is. I have no upper body strength. I can't get there.
Oh no.
I know it was just watching back the video. I see this like look of despair on my face when the buzzer goes, or I'm like, I was so close. I just needed slightly longer fingers. I knew what I was thinking at that time.
Oh no. So
like, why?
so you bring up an interesting point. You talk about watching the video back. I feel like in the context of everything happening, it might be easy to forget that this is on TV. Does that enter into your mind state at any point? Are you at any point nervous, or are you at that age where you're not really worried about embarrassing yourself on TV yet?
I don't think I was worried about embarrassing myself on TV. I knew whatever happened would happen. I was okay with the outcome from when I started. I mean, otherwise, I don't think my parents would have encouraged me or allowed me to do this if they didn't think that I was mature enough to handle, well, you might not win. And I was
And
okay with that. I said, you know what, I think it's just really cool that I get to be on a game show. And that, you know, I knew I knew that wouldn't probably embarrass myself academically, which I think was the main thing going through my mind at that point. I said, just don't make me look like an idiot that I just didn't know the answer to some easy question. I knew based upon the test they give me, and like, I would probably get most of these right. I will look okay.
Well, yeah,
But I
because if you don't, how are
accepted.
you going to get on Team Jeopardy?
Exactly, exactly. Whereas, me not being able to climb the rope to get to the number, my peers I knew would overlook that because we're all gifted nerds, so they understood. We were similar in that respect. I'd be okay with it.
How were you treated by the staff? I've heard nothing but positive stories about kids' game shows and kids who have been contestants on those shows and being treated like almost like family, where it's a very nurturing and sensitive and inclusive atmosphere. Was that true for you?
Yeah, they were super kind. I don't remember anything terrible happening at all. They were really professional, and it was clear that um they were good with working with young adults, which was perfect. So I don't recall anything but just them being really nice, and doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Good. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful. I bet that helps, thinking about the experience and having those memories, having so many positive facets of the experience to reflect on. I feel like that has to be great.
Yes. And I also think about the this is such a mid 90s time capsule. It was hosted by Steve Saunders, who like hosted MTV Spring Break or Summer, what I forget exactly what he hosted on MTV. I kind of sort of knew who he was, but he wasn't like some big name. Um, that they could have brought in from somewhere. But I remember him even as a host in the interactions that we had. Like he was just energetic and positive and you know doing a good job with the task he'd been handed of a we don't know if this is going to make a children's game show if you think about it.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, you're jumping into sort of untested waters, and I mean it's a kids' game show, and those have been done several times up to that point. But I don't think there's been anything like what you're describing on TV at that point. We're talking about 96, 97. I don't think that we're in an era yet where, I mean, the show kind of sounds like it's before its time, right? Because there's, like you said, a lot of sort of
CGI.
CGI and
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I mean, the first game I think was there was like dodgeballs getting fired at whoever is standing on a bridge protecting these probably foam tombstones. The boys took that one. Uh and the other partner would come in that as long as you stayed on the bridge, you would have a bonus round to answer some trivia questions, which I was looking forward to doing, obviously. My partner fell off the bridge and was CG vaporized. So I did not have the opportunity to answer all those trivia questions, which I probably would have nailed. I've somewhat recently watched back my episode and I watched the other team answer the questions, and I was like, oh, I would have known all those answers at that point.
It's funny. I'm thinking about that, right? I'm thinking about losing on a show like that, and like you said, being CGI vaporized. And I can
Yes.
imagine one of my friends getting on that show and getting vaporized, and all of us just going, "Hell yeah!" Like that's the
Yes.
coolest thing that you could take from that show.
Oh yes. No, there was a whole lot of CG going on. And you're right. It was a little bit ahead of its time that way because if you think about the real children's game shows that preceded were your Nickelodeon shows like Guts and Legends, and those are very much not CG'd anything. Those are, I mean, beautiful sets, but very physical.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And I imagine that being on a show like this, you must feel a little bit like a movie star. It's like making a movie.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I didn't, I took it as very cool at the time. I remember coming to school maybe with the school year that started not too long after I taped this and just mentioning to my classmates, oh yeah, like I recorded a game show. Like, oh cool, are you on Jeopardy? No, no, it's a new show that hasn't quite started yet. And they're like, oh okay, that's cool. Or maybe they were asking, were you on Legends of the Hidden Temple? No, I wasn't on Legends of the Hidden Temple.
Yeah, kids don't really get the nuance of it yet. If you're not on Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune or Double Dare, they don't really care.
Yeah, but I find that if anything, it has more staying power as an adult. The random factoid getting to know you. Like, I'll just drop the fact of something that happened because I was on a game show. Like, wait, you were on a game show? Tell me which one. And you go back to the same. Yeah, so it lasted for a season and it was a kids game show, but it had a really fun story to it. And they're like, oh yeah, that's cool. I think in adulthood, people actually appreciate hearing about the experience more than my eighth grade classmates did at the time.
Isn't that one of the best things you can take away from the experience? Just the fact that so many years later, the question of, when somebody asks you, tell me something interesting about yourself or tell me a fun story about yourself. What's a fun fact? Oh my God, you are set for life. That's always a fun fact. And it ages
Absolutely.
well. It's like wine. You know what I mean? I mean, these days, tell somebody that you were on a kids game show in the 90s. I mean,
Yes,
that is hallowed ground,
absolutely. Especially when you start working with people who were born after 2000. I'm like, oh wait, you didn't exist when this show was on. Okay.
Right, exactly. What did you win? How did you do?
So this is where I think it's the best part of the story. Um, at the final, there were four games and then the final. After four games, we were down by 40 points. Uh, we had 50 points, the other team had 90 points. But the last game, running through the haunted house, was worth 50 points. So it was still legitimately anybody's game. And all of these games, the reason why we're down so many points is you had a game where you had walls closing in on you and you had to fill in the blank with the letters that were on another wall, and there was a fog machine and all this stuff, and we couldn't find a letter, so we missed one word, so we didn't get the bonus points. The aforementioned, my partner getting CG vaporized, so we couldn't get the trivia questions. My lack of an ability to climb up rope ladders. The other team just kept doing slightly better, not missing the kickball as there's a 120-mile-an-hour fan going at you on this train thing. Like, there's all these things that would happen. The other team, we did okay, but the other team just kept doing a little better. So we were down by 40 points. The last game, running through the haunted house, we sent the boys in. I mean, what else were we gonna do? It's like, it just made sense. And we
Haunted
were
house is a boy's job.
it's a, and I didn't grow up to be somebody who says, "Oh yeah, there's gendered tasks or whatever." It's like, no. At that point, it was just I needed somebody who was more physically capable than me to run through this haunted house. There were rubber skulls that were hidden throughout various rooms of the house. So you would have a particular room. They'd give probably a certain amount of time and then tell you to move on to the next room. And the teammates, myself and the girl on the other team, were outside with we were able to they had a camera view. So we were able to kind of see what was going on. And again, we are mic'd up. So I was able to say to my partner, oh, look up there, or like underneath the bookshelf or whatever. If we saw something on the camera that they didn't, perhaps. I didn't remember seeing a whole lot that he didn't because, again, it was full of fog machines and fake cobwebs and all this kind of thing. But, I probably did something at that point. The the boys would go in, they'd gather up all these rubber skulls into a sack, and then they'd say, okay, time to leave. They'd run out, and you had these stakes that were outside of the haunted house, and the skulls had a hole through the top of it, so you would put these rubber skulls on a stake. Again, I think back and I say, this is a very niche audience that this whole game show had to have appealed to. Like, you had to be into really spooky stuff, apparently, to, say, oh, I'm just
Right.
stabbing rubber skulls through a stake here.
And for a
So
Saturday morning, too, it's odd. It
exactly,
seems like it's more of a primetime thing. That seems like something that would play at night. Like Tales from the Crypt.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So the boys came out with their bags full of rubber skulls, and we'd both go to our respective stakes. Each team had a stake, put the skulls in, and whoever had the most rubber skulls won. And the at some point, we looked, we shook out the bag, we didn't have any more. The other team, like, we're done. They're like, oh wait, we found one more skull. And at that point, I wasn't looking and counting as we were going. I mean, and they were stuffed on there pretty well. The boys on both teams found a lot of skulls. And it's like, oh, there's one more. Well, host Steve Saunders goes and counts, and we had one more skull than the other team. So the other team, who had been just doing a little bit better all game, when it finally mattered, we upped them by one skull. When I tell this story now in adulthood, they're like, wow, what an amazing story. I said, I couldn't have manufactured this if I tried. I really couldn't have. So, again, in very true 90s form, the winning team received their very own Macintosh Performer 6300 CD computers.
Whoa.
And the other team got Grolier's new book of knowledge.
They got the home version of the computer.
Yes, the home version of the computer. Exactly.
Amazing.
Now, as an aside, as I mentioned, the little boy who I was paired with, nice kid. We were shocked. And we're talking to my parents about this afterwards, and it's not that my parents didn't believe in us, but I mean, they had watched us get demolished all game. I mean, they were obviously thrilled that we won, but they were fully anticipating that we would not win, right? I mean, it was, it just seemed inevitable. So it was just such a lovely come from behind win, for everybody to observe. On the other team, the girl, she was very sweet. The boy on the other team was more athletic than the boy on my team. He was very openly competitive. He was very athletic, and you would watch the little interviews that we would do in between the games of, oh, how'd that go, kind of thing. And he had a bit of an attitude about, and a bit of cockiness about his performance. That, I brushed it off. Again, I was used to just dealing with different kinds of kids. I was like, all right, this is just how this kid is. He's not my partner, at least, so it's fine. When they lost, I remember the other little boy, just he was in tears. And he was crying because he's like, we really needed that computer. Now I'm going to take a step back. Mid-90s, many families did not have a computer. If a family had a computer, though, they had a computer. It wasn't typical for families to have multiple computers. I mean, if you had internet access, it was dial-up. You're not going to have 4 people. Again, kids today do not know how good that they have it with connectivity.
No. Yes, that's true. And if you had a computer, it was a showpiece. It was in the center of the house. It was somewhere where everyone could see it. Mine was in the kitchen.
Oh. Yeah, we had ours in a loft, but it's for my dad's work and everything, but everybody got to use it, so it was fine.
Sure.
So yes, we had a computer. The little boy who was crying needed a computer. His family had a computer. This wasn't about, oh, it's because we couldn't afford one. He had a computer, but he was crying because he and his brother would fight over who gets to use the computer. So he really needed that computer, so that he and his brother wouldn't fight. And I remember at that moment, I did not feel bad for him.
No, really stretching the definition of need there.
Need, exactly.
Right.
I mean, I would have been absolutely fine if we were a 1-computer family. Well, we became a 2-computer family. Temporarily we were very much a Windows, I mean, a DOS, later Windows family. So we had a Mac in the house for a bit. I used it for about 2 years, and then I sold it because I built my own Windows PC from scratch. But it was great to finish out middle school and start high school. And I remember buying the Mac versions of SimCity and things of that nature because urban planning, go urban planning.
SimCity, amazing soundtrack too.
Yes, that too. So, it was, I felt very fortunate that I won. But I just always remembered it. If the little boy on the other team just didn't make that comment. Like I wouldn't have felt like, okay, now I'm kind of happy I won. I mean, I would have been happy, but I said that's having way too much of a chip on your shoulder.
Sure, justified in your victory.
Yes. I said, you know what? I'm okay. You've come from behind or not, we earned that. We got one more skull. It's just how the game works.
That's right. That's the way the skulls crumble. Tell me about when you saw yourself on TV. Did you record the episode yourself or did somebody
Yes.
get it for you? Okay, so you recorded it yourself.
I think it's funny. I recently was going through some childhood stuff, papers and things like that, and I found all of the paperwork I had saved from being on this show. Even what kind of we got like the flyer when you tried out. Oh, what are you looking for, and that kind of thing. Um, the descriptions of all the games. I was like, wow, not surprising about myself, knowing myself that I filed things in a very organized fashion. I found the little sticky note on one of the documents that has various writing from my mom and from my dad, I guess whoever was answering the phone at that time, and I see like a date in October, which might have been the air date. Because my mom was probably speaking to the producers and asking questions of, oh, do you know when they're going to air? Do you know what's I have this like memento from that. So I think we didn't know exactly when the show would air, but we had an idea that it was going to be earlier or later in the season. So I think it might have been 11 a.m. on Saturdays or whatever it was. We would just kind of have a tape ready to go. To look and just hit record, and yeah, if we started seeing my episode, that tape was going to keep going, and that's precisely what happened. My family sat down, we watched it live, we recorded it, and 20 something years later, I transferred it to digital, so it is not going to degrade into obscurity.
Wonderful. And
Yes.
I imagine that watching a show like that, which again, just from hearing you tell, it sounds like it took a lot to make an episode of this particular show. Watching it and seeing how they edited it and how the effects came out, I imagine that was really, really fun.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially seeing like the CGI skull and everything, or watching my partner get vaporized, because obviously it didn't happen in real life. Um, Again, there was a game where there was a moving train that you were trying to just move dodgeballs at these marked off places, as there was these giant industrial fans blowing wind at 120 miles an hour at you. At the end, you had to get the dodgeballs into the baskets. Um, Seeing, I mean, we knew what it looked like in person, but seeing it with all the CGI background and the special effects or whatever, we're like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool what they did with that.
Incredible. Let's talk about how you feel about the experience as a whole. I mean, this is something that happened early on in your life. I imagine that it's come into play in various social situations. Like you mentioned, you've brought it up. It's been a fun fact that you've told people about. Looking back on the whole experience, what do you think the experience brought to your life as it stands right now?
I would say I mean, other than obviously being a fun fact to share, it kind of places you into this weird club of fellow nerds in a way. To say, okay, I was on a game show. As somebody who just loves watching game shows, even as bizarrely obscure as this experience was, it's something that you can say, I understand how things like this might be put together. You can get that from attending a taping, but it's a little different of, you know, going into high pressure situations of, there's that bit of adrenaline. I mean, I later, of course, had to learn things like getting up in front of a crowd of people and making a presentation. And, you think it's not that I would constantly think, oh, yes, that experience I had when I was almost 12 being on a game show when I had to learn these kinds of skills. But it, I feel like it helped shape a little bit to say, yeah, I can do things that are a little difficult or maybe a little bit out of my comfort zone. As comfortable as I was with game shows and whatnot, again, I was a pretty reserved kid. I mean, I was just the nerd in class who would just keep her head down and answer questions sometimes and whatnot. I feel like this maybe allowed me to open up a little bit more, which then, again, school eventually helped with that further.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants, is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Corey Anatata. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of Buzzerblog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutiae of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.